Hello, everybody. So today I wanted to talk about Ray Gunn, whose real name is Rachel Gunn. So she's got a name that, if you shorten your name Rachel to Ray, which a lot of people do, then you become Ray Gunn, and that's Ray Gunn, which is sort of like a futuristic thing. And so that became her nickname as a breakdancer. Now, most people would have known what happened in the Olympics in Paris in June, July, when she sort of had a bit of a ridiculous breakdancing competition. But recently, she's got even more damage because she's tried to sue somebody for running it was called, what was it called? The Raygun Musical. And she said they didn't get her permission, so she's trying to sue them for $10,000 now, and that's really hurt her. So before I get into my opinion on whether she's done the right thing there, I wanted to really go back and make sure that I've got all my facts correct about her. So first of all, so Raygun is 36 years old, which, I mean, I'm older than that. I'm 49. But in terms of being a breakdancer, that's really, really old. I mean, in most sports, people start retiring 30, 35. But in breakdancing, it's one of the younger sports. I mean, you have people that are professional breakdancers at 14. And even in the Olympics, there were 16, 17-year-olds. And the oldest people were in their mid 20s. So I think 26 was the oldest, not counting her. So she was 10 years too old, really, maybe even 13, 15 years. Now, fair enough, the Olympics has never had breakdancing before and never will again. It was a demonstration sport. Snoop Doggy Dogg came along and got excited about it, and so I'm sure there was a lot of competition for it. Now, the Australian breakdancing scene is not very strong, not compared to USA and some other countries. So it's probably not a surprise that the person that was in it wasn't that great. And also, female breakdancing, because of the physical differences between men and women, is a lot worse than male breakdancing. Now, I know in some sports the difference isn't that big, but in breakdancing it's enormous, such that the worst breakdancer in the male competition was still a lot better than the best female. Now, I feel, considering it's an artistic expression, they could have made up for it by allowing outfits and other artistic things that women would be better at and men weren't. But they didn't allow that, which I think was disappointing. I mean, if you compare it with, say, figure skating, where obviously men are stronger, in figure skating, they tend to have women look beautiful and look amazing, and people love to watch that. And I think they could have done that with breakdancing. And I think it's disappointing that they didn't do that. And I saw a lot of people with uniforms, which they shouldn't have been wearing, really. I mean, and and what Raygun came out with was a tracksuit that was sort of like what you'd see people wearing before they'd swim. So they'd be swimming, they wear that sort of an outfit, and then they take it off and they've got their swimming costume and they swim. Or equally when they're running or doing some other athletic endeavor. It wasn't appropriate for breakdancing, and it was just boring and ugly. And, and if you're going to have an outfit, make it exciting. But I think really, some streetwear, something fashionable would have been great. And I mean, I think I don't care if it was Olympics. I mean, you've got to look at what is good at the sport. And I think breakdancing is a legitimate sport. I mean, I know Michael Jackson, people don't think of him as the best breakdancer in the world, but in a lot of ways he popularized it. And there were a lot of people after Michael Jackson's breakdancing in his music videos in 1984, 85. They started doing breakdancing and it became a real big thing. And yeah, so when I saw her performing, and I actually saw it live, I happened to be watching it, I was quite confused. It was Bruce McAvaney, I believe, was commentating from memory. And what I saw happen there was it just looked really bad. I was like, oh, it's not very good. And they're trying to drum it up and say that she's a doctor of, well, effectively a doctor of breakdancing, a PhD in breakdancing. And yeah, I mean, you don't really have academics performing sports. They're often they're better at theory than practice. And it just looked a bit awkward. I mean, uh, there was the kangaroo hop that just didn't seem very highly skilled, and just. I mean, I know there was some skills in it, and maybe I couldn't do it. I'm certainly not a professional breakdancer and never have been, but it just didn't look very good. And the other girls that were she was against looked miles better. Now, in fairness to her, she explained this later afterwards, and she explained that she was not as highly skilled as the other girls and couldn't win in terms of regular power moves. So she went for the originality points because there were meant to be five categories, and one of them was originality. So she was hoping that by doing something really bizarre, she would get extra points, but she didn't, and she lost. She in fact thought that was quite unfair that she didn't get those bonus points. Now, perhaps it's just me, but I think that if people watch breakdancing, there's certain things they look for, and no, power moves isn't the only thing, but it is a bit of it. I mean, you have to do that spinning stuff. You have to do either a back spin, a head spin, a hand spin. One of those three has to be a part of it. And she didn't do any of them. I mean, without the spins, is it really breakdancing? I mean, it has to be powerful, it has to be dangerous, it has to be spectacular. And if you look at the men's, not just the grand final, but all of well, most of the competitions, they were amazing to look at. Now, the women weren't always. There's I think there's a strength issue, and also I think that they should have had better costumes and allowed them to be doing what women do better than men, which is, I mean, women generally are very good at looking good, and if they'd made that a component of it, like they do with the ballroom dancing or with the figure skating, I think it could have been a nice spectacle. But they didn't do that, and I think if you were doing street break dancing, you would have that for the women. The women would be doing your Nicki Minaj sort of thing, your Megan the Stallion sort of thing, that those sort of people, and you would have had that sort of thing, and you would have had that bit of flair. I mean, there is a definite female hip hop community out there, and there's female rappers that, I mean, that's associated with breakdancing, and they do well, and they're popular, and they're liked, and some of them are very good, and it's just, it's disappointing to me that they sort of did the females in the same way as they did the males, and they should have done it a different way. They should have had more about style, more about looking cool and fun, and definitely not that outfit. And I mean, her justification essentially reminded me of a guy called Stephen Bradbury. Now, people in Australia probably would know that name. If you're watching this from outside of Australia, you might not know him. So, Stephen Bradbury in 1998, maybe, not sure of the year, he participated in the Winter Olympics and he was not favourite. He was ranked, I think, 25th in the world and only barely qualified. And he had a strategy. He somehow just snuck into the semi-finals, which I think was top 16, and it was, or maybe it was top 20. He only just made it, and he had a strategy that said, well, he'll never beat them in terms of speed. They're much faster than he ever was, but he would hope to stay in touch, and if they crashed, as they often did, in speed skating, so speed ice skating, then if they crashed, he hoped to just zip past them. And he did that in the semi-finals and in the final, and he won the gold medal. And it was quite ridiculous. He didn't win the semi-final, but he qualified because enough people crashed, and he just stayed back and didn't let them fall on him and trip him up, and he came, I think, second in his semi-final, and in the final he won. And now he went there and he said, well, that was his strategy. He was waiting for that. Now, if you played that 20 times, that's the only one he's going to win. In fact, even 1 in 20 is unlikely, and particularly since it happened in the semi-final as well. And he only barely made it through the quarterfinal. So he wasn't genuinely a top 20 person. He was, 25th. Still, look, there's no, you shouldn't be ashamed of being 25th best in the world. That's very good. And he previously he'd got up as high as I think 16th. But that he was past his prime. He had no legitimate chance of winning in terms of speed or any other skill area. So he went for this one in a million chance, and it worked. So in the same way, and the reason why I'm comparing him is that Raygun had the idea that she could never win in the power moves, never win in the things that make most people think that breakdancing is good. So she went for the idea she'd do something really unusual, which was the kangaroo dance and all the other little weird little things, and hope that that would impress the judges enough that she would win some points. Now, it didn't work. I can understand that strategy because if she was the worst or one of the worst break dancers in the group, and I don't know if she was literally the absolute worst, there were some others that weren't very good either. But if she was in the bottom three or four, you have to do something to give yourself a chance. And she did that to give herself a chance. And I think, well done. Of course, she got no points in the first one. Why did she keep doing that in the second? And I think she had 5 rounds. I only watched the first one live. I think I might have watched a bit of the second one because, it was 1 o'clock in the morning and it was quite ridiculous and not really worth watching. But I don't know why she continued with that strategy after it failed. It didn't work. Pick a different strategy. Surely she'd have that strategy, and if that doesn't work, have a different strategy. But she didn't. And I think that's one disappointing thing. But maybe she didn't practice any other strategy and she just kept doing it. But and she was acknowledging that she was a Steve Bradbury. She was not really at the level of the other competitors. Wasn't really at a level where she was any real chance of winning. Now, I can understand that, and certainly, there was a time when I passed the Olympic qualifying marks lots of times in lots of different events in athletics, and there was a time when except for some stupid people in my life, I probably would have made it to the Commonwealth Games back in 1994. Now, had I made it to the Commonwealth Games, I've checked the results, I would have come probably just about last. If that was me in that situation, and that would have probably been for triple jump, I think I would have probably come for my best ever one. I would have come like 24th out of 28, and I could easily have come last. Now, the thing is, I probably wouldn't have been on TV because they don't usually show people that come last. And if I had, well, they would have said, oh, well, and the only reason I even had two people going in it was because it was Australia was hosting. Was it in Brisbane that year? Anyway, and because the Commonwealth Games is a level below the Olympics. It's for the former British Empire, the Commonwealth, British Commonwealth. And yeah, so if I'd gone in that, would I have just done my normal thing? Probably not, because I knew there was an issue with my step. It was too short. I'd do a big hop, big jump, and a small step, which was mainly because of where I do my events. I had two that had the wrong size um, pit and the wrong size jumping spot, so I had to do that because otherwise I'd land in the pit and then I'm landing in the sand before I've done my jump, and kept happening. So I used to deliberately do a short step and then try to jump over the sand, and often I'd jump right over the sand and land in the grass behind it, and that didn't feel nice. It hurt. So I actually used to stop myself. So if I actually qualified, and in theory I could have done an extra bit more by practicing on somewhere with the right equipment. So I probably would have gone to the venue maybe 3 or 4 months early, try to get practice on that and try to work on a technique. Now, I still might have come last, but I might not have. I might have. That was my only chance because, in theory, I could have improved by 1 or 2 meters. And if I improved by 3 meters, that's the world record and that's a gold medal. And if I improve by 1 meter, well, I'm not last. I'm qualifying for the top 12 and the second round. So, it's a difficult thing. I was doing 1570, which is not terrible. It was the state record. And it was second best in Australia that year. So, um, it was not terrible, but I mean the world record's 1870. So, if I improved up to 1670, then I'd be the best in Australia. I'd be Australian record holder, and I would have been qualifying for the second round. So, and that the only way I could do that is practice on a different facility, which I didn't have access to. So, because I couldn't do any further than that where I was practicing, and I didn't have access to anywhere where I was living. There was nowhere I couldn't. I'd have to move interstate, and so I would have had to practice by going interstate to Brisbane, I think it was, and practice there on the actual bigger areas so that I could try to work on my step because it was a bit of a psychological thing. Now, it might not have worked, and I might have done worse. I might, but if I'm doing worse, I'm still finishing last. So the thing is, and my point of that little thing about me is when you're in that situation and you know you're probably going to finish last, you try something. Now, some people, the thing they try is steroids. They shouldn't be doing that, but you should be doing something and to give yourself a chance. So I completely applaud Raygun for doing that. And I think if you'd gone there and what she probably should have done, and I think this part of it was the right thing to do. She went and had an interview and said, "Well, that was deliberate because I knew I wasn't as good as the others, so I was trying something." Now, if she did that, everyone would have gone, "Yeah, no, good on you." And she did that. She actually said that. But then there was a problem. Then she said, "Oh, but I'm the best in Australia." And we saw the videos and we're like, maybe not. And then she said, "Well, actually, she's the best in the world." And we're like, wait on. If you're Steve Bradbury, ranked 25, how are you the best in the world? If you're the best in the world, why are you having to do that sort of thing? I mean, I had no illusions. I was not the best in the world. If I'd made it to that Commonwealth Games, and I was never going to make it to the Olympics, but if I'd made it to that Commonwealth Games and I'd tried that thing and it failed, and I'd been interviewed by whoever, and they said, "Oh, you stuffed up," I would have said, "Well, I tried this thing, it didn't work." Oh well, had to try it. I wouldn't be then saying, "Oh, I'm the best in the world." And she said she was the best in the world. Now that's a lie. That's not. There's no interpretation of that. Now I know that there was some point system weird thing, and she got a ranking of number one. I was like, what? I mean, again, Stephen Bradbury would never have been ranked number one. I mean, he never was in his life. I mean, he was ranked, I think, 15th at one point, and by that Olympics, he was down to 25. Fair enough. Um, but a lot of people say he deserved it. Fair enough. But Raygun, she said she was bullied. Now, I don't think she was. I think she was made fun of. But this is the thing: you're in a public thing like that, you get made fun of. There's people that their shorts fall down when they're competing; they get made fun of. There's all sorts of people that get made fun of for different reasons. It was a flash in the pan thing. Problem was when I went to look at the replays. I mean, I taped it on my thing because I taped the different events just because they were on ridiculous times of the night, and I could see it then. But when I went to the highlights, it was not on the highlights. You couldn't get footage of it, and this was bizarre. Because if she did this on purpose, she should be happy for people to watch it. I mean, if I'd done my thing and completely stuffed up and finished dead last, and maybe I overstepped and fouled all three times or whatever, which could well have happened if I was doing that, or injured myself or whatever, I would have just said, well, that's was my strategy. I was trying my best. If Steve Bradbury had tried his best and finished last and not made us the quarterfinals, he would have said, oh, well, I knew I wasn't fast enough, so I was just trying this strategy. Didn't work. She should have just owned it and just said it didn't work. So why were people protecting her, and who was protecting her, that they wouldn't allow that in the highlights? So it wasn't on TV, it wasn't on YouTube, it wasn't in any news reports. And then people that got that footage, which was quite hard to get. I mean, I had a copy. I still got it on my what do you call it? The little recorder thing. I've still got it there from when it was live. But people that put that up on YouTube were getting banned. People that didn't put it up and then just did their own impression were getting banned. It became quite ridiculous. There were all these people that were using the vision of the idea of this was bullying, is it bullying to make fun of somebody that's a public figure? You're a public figure. It's not bullying. Bullying is bullying somebody that's not a public figure, somebody, an ordinary person. Once you're a public figure, you're not bullied. And that protection of her, well, they weren't protecting anyone else. They were making fun of heaps of people. But that protection of her was ridiculous. I mean, I can compare it with those two boxers that were in the female category that had both been banned by the International Boxing um, Association, IBA. And then the IOC said, oh, we're not recognising that because that's run by Russians. And that's effectively what they said. There was no way that it was wrong. They were definitely male, and they weren't intersex, they weren't trans, they were male. They were cheating. This is blatant cheating, and they were allowed in and they won gold medals. And then they complained that it was bullying. Now, only one complained that it was bullying. The Algerian one. I'm not going to mention the name. The Taiwanese one didn't say anything. The Algerian one said it was bullying, made a big fuss out of it, blah, 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 blah. Now, we all criticised that Algerian. We've forgotten the name of the Taiwanese one. There were two. We forgot that one. That one didn't make a big scene out of it. They go, oh no, you're going after Muslims. You weren't going after Muslims, mate. You were going after someone that was cheating. Blatant cheating. And I really do hope that in the future, at some point, those gold medals get taken from them. Now, what they do with it, who knows? But you know what? What was really bad about that one, and I'm off on a tangent, but it's the really bad bit is that boxing is no longer in the Olympics. And it's because of that. No, not because two men competed in the women's division, but because the IOC no longer recognise the IBA because it's run by a Russian and because the Russians banned them. So IOC have stripped them, and there's no other body. Now, they've got World Boxing, which is trying to replace it, but it's not recognised. Most of the countries that do boxing do not recognise World Boxing, they recognise IBA. IBA has been about for donkey's years, and boxing has been there since the first modern Olympics and was in the ancient Olympics. So it'll be the first sport that was in the ancient Olympics and made it to the modern Olympics that is being banned. And that's not going to be in the next one, not going to be in Los Angeles, and it might never come back. So that's selfish, but not getting as much hate as Raygun. Also saying, oh, bullied and trying to sue Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling, and then, oh, more reports, oh, actually, they're male. You know, you're not going to have much of a lawsuit if that's actually factual. So, anyway, so Raygun has now got her own lawsuit. Now, there are musicals about people. There's Shane Warne the musical. I've never seen it. Shane Warne the musical asked Shane Warne for permission. Raygun the musical didn't ask Raygun for permission. Now, that's very bad. You shouldn't be doing that. Now, technically, not asking someone to do a musical for permission to do a musical about them is obvious brand infringement. Um, I mean, there are times when you don't have to. Like if they're a convicted criminal and they're in jail, you don't have to ask their permission. They've lost their rights because they're in prison. Um, Now, there are certain circumstances where you can do it, but this one's a bit of a funny one. And I think realistically, if it'd have to be wholly positive for them not to need her permission. But even then, I mean, when Shane Warne the musical came out, Shane Warne loved it. He went on there, he supported it. I don't know if they had to pay him for it because it was advertising for him. If Raygun the musical came out and was positive, which is what the organisers said it was, would have been positive for her. She would have she would have gone there, gone to the opening night. In fact, it was only going to go for one night, and supported it. That's advertising her brand. Now, instead, she asked for them to shut it down and be paid $10,000. Not one or the other. Not pay me $10,000 and then you can run it, but shut it down and pay me $10,000 for the insult. Now, this was a community theatre. They were charging $5 a ticket. 100 people were going to go. It's $500. None of them were paid. They weren't paid actors, and that $500 was all going to go to charity to a women's shelter. Now, there are a few people that criticise women pretending that they were domestically abused and all that, but that's never the fault of the women's shelter. Mm, not really. So it's a pretty worthwhile cause. So even still, it's $500. They offered to give her the full $500, and she said, "No, I want 10,000." They don't have 10,000, and the thing has been cancelled. They wanted, so they were offering to give her $500. Now, if she'd sued, would she have won, and how much would she have gotten? So to work out how much she would have gotten. So firstly, if you're asking to do something based on somebody else's work or their life or whatever, you would either give them a proportion of the profits or you'd give them a certain one-off payment or perhaps a combination of both. So, for example, there was a situation where MC Hammer made a song that had bits from Prince's song called When Doves Cry. And I believe he paid Prince about 10% of the royalties and $5,000. Now, he made a lot more than that. He was fine. Now, I'm not sure of the exact amount, but I believe it was around 10%. So he got about 10,000, $5,000 plus 10%, pretty standard. And then it made millions. And Prince got 10% of those millions. But MC Hammer made lots of money out of it. And then we also had the situation of Vanilla Ice. About the same time, Vanilla Ice was actually before that, a few months before. And Vanilla Ice made Ice Ice Baby, and he didn't ask Queen for permission to use the opening bit from Under Pressure, which wasn't one of Queen's big songs, but it was still fairly popular. And of course, Ice Ice Baby was much more popular than Under Pressure, and it only used the dum 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 dum, which is the first bit of Under Pressure before they start singing. But he kept using it. Now, if he'd asked for permission, he probably would have had to pay 10%, maybe five. 10% and $5,000, he would have won a lot of money. But because he didn't ask for permission, in fact, he denied it, said it was a coincidence, and then he lost, he had to pay, I believe, 50%. So that is because he didn't ask for permission. Now, if you've got this situation, and let's say that the musical ran and they made their $500 profit, and then she found out about it and sued them, how much would she get? I would think if she won, she'd get half of the profit. So the profits are $500, she's going to get 250. Now, of course, they didn't ask for permission, but they also cancelled. Now, if they've cancelled, she gets nothing from a lawsuit. There's no penalty. And so her asking for $10,000 is ridiculous if it's also cancelled. But also, if she said, pay me or I will sue, how much should they pay? I think about 10%. Should be $50. So they should be paying her $50 in order to run it, if they're paying in advance and she's agreeing. She should be asking for $50 or just a straight 10%. And if she asks for a straight 10%, then it doesn't matter how much they make, she's going to get 10% out of that. If it's just a single night thing, $50. But if they end up doing it for a long time, it's more money than that. And if they charge more than $5 a ticket, it's more than that. That's how much she should have asked for. $10,000 was disproportionate. Now, was there any chance that she would get $10,000 in an actual lawsuit? And I think the simple answer is probably not. Not in terms of copyright. You'd have to argue something else. You'd have to argue defamation, that sort of thing. Then she might get it. But then, I mean, defamation, you'd be saying, well, that's her reputation's already damaged. It's not really that. It'd be a difficult one. Now, that's if she wins. Now, the question then is, would she win? And the first thing to know, that a judge would note, so once they've got the facts, So first of all, they'd say, was this in any way making you look bad? Was it defamatory? Was it unfair? Was it mean? Now, if it was a wholly positive and funny um, musical, as they claimed it was going to be, I think that she'd lose that because that wouldn't be hurting her reputation. Even if it did mention the kangaroo dance and various other things, I think it'd need to damage her reputation further than it's already is, and that's quite difficult to do. So I think without looking at the musical, I think chances are they'd be okay to do it even without her permission, even without paying her. So, and I think her arguing that, I mean, that kangaroo dance, I've seen that before in Aboriginal communities, and I'm sure that's where she got it from, where there's Aboriginal communities that have kangaroos as a totem. They do that kind of dance. And I think you'd find that all of her moves were from somewhere or someone else. Now, they probably weren't copyrighted, but she doesn't own those moves. The only bit that she owns is her name, which is Raygun, and it's really only in the context of Raygun, the breakdancer. So if they change her name ever so slightly, she has nothing to sue them over. And even if they're using the Australian kit, again, that's not, she doesn't own that. So the bit that she'd own would be very limited and the damage would be very limited. So chances are she'd probably lose that lawsuit. Now, she might win. There's probably an argument to win, but what she'd win would at most be $250. And then we have the case that she was offered $500 in order to continue with it, which is the whole amount. She'd only ever get half at most, because that's what Vanilla Ice lost to Queen. Um, he lost half, and in fact, pretty much that meant that it wasn't worth doing. That was his only big hit. So yeah, I think the fact that she turned down getting all of the profits would mean that she would lose a lawsuit because the judge would say, "Have you tried mediation?" They'd say, "Yes, we have tried mediation. What we offered, $500." He says, "Well, even if you won, you'd get less than that." And that would therefore make it vexatious. So the vexatious means that you've made a lawsuit just out of spite. And because she's turned down a reasonable offer that's in fact more than the maximum she would get, that means that she's going ahead with it out of spite. She's not doing it because she's facing actual loss. She's doing it because she's spiteful. And I think that that's really, she would lose the lawsuit, even if she would have won if there was no mediation offer. I think she might have won if there was no mediation offer, but the fact that there was a mediation offer and it was that generous means that she would lose. And in fact, I think that the people going ahead with well, if they went ahead with it, as far as I know, they're not. But that musical would now have every right to go ahead. And I mean, they might have to change her name and slightly change her image, but I don't even think they really need to do that because she's made this fuss. And also, okay, this was a community theatre. I think this now opens the door for someone more professional to now make more substantial musical about it, which I think a lot of people, based on the reactions, a lot of people would watch. So if I'm not saying it would be Disney, but someone as big as Disney or someone else could now probably go ahead with a musical about her, and they could talk about the phenomenon of it. I mean, there's probably a limit for how nasty they can be, but as long as they're not as nasty as the general community with it, and be fair with it, so show the nasty and her response to it and how she considers it bullying and all that. I think a lot of people would be interested in that. And so where to from here? So I think that the first thing is that Rachel Gunn has completely stuffed up how she's handled all this. She should hire herself a public relations group, not just rely on the project to make her look good. A lot of people don't care what the project says. And I think that one thing she should do is shake hands with the community theatre, say that she approves them going ahead with it, and maybe ask if she can have a look at a rehearsal for it, maybe make some changes, and then go to the opening night and stand up and wave to people. And I think that would be better, you know. And I think she needs to encourage people. I mean, people that took out ray gun Halloween costumes were not necessarily hating her. If you ask people, a lot of people liked her and they liked the funny part of it, which she did on purpose. Now, she did it to impress the judges. It has impressed the general community in its originality. Now, there's a lot of people that say it wasn't very skilled and it wasn't Olympic level, and that's probably fair enough as well. Arguably, Stephen Bradbury's level run when he won the gold medal was definitely not gold medal level. Was it Olympics level? Probably only barely. He wasn't easily in the Olympics. He was barely in the Olympics. And I think that's the case for Rachel Gunn. And now, is she definitely the best female breakdancer in Australia? I'm not familiar with the scene. From what I've seen of the championships, it's very debatable whether she is. I don't think it's a guarantee that she's definitely not, but I think if she is, it's only barely, and certainly not easily, and it's certainly not a guarantee that she definitely deserved that spot. Maybe she knew the system and knew which events to go in and how to do it and all that sort of stuff and was quite manipulative. But I think in terms of talent, she probably wasn't there. Now, I don't know if she was corrupt with it all and her husband and all that. There's some claims that she was, some claims that she wasn't. I think that's best left to a lawsuit. And there has been no lawsuit. There's just claims. So until there's an actual lawsuit, I don't think, you know, people can say things that aren't true all the time. I don't know that it's definitely false, but I think that there's no current definite proof. Like we don't have a lawsuit saying that. They don't even have a lawsuit filed. So if if people really believed it was true, they would sue her over it. They would say, "Hey, you took out my spot. I'm going to sue you." Nobody's done that. So you'd think that the other competitors, if they thought that it was corrupt, you'd think that they would sue her. They haven't. So, you know, and they did, by the way, with the boxing, other competitors were saying on TV that it was wrong. So there's a difference there. Definitely corrupt with the boxing, not so much corrupt with this. So, yeah, but anyway, I think she's completely messed it up. I think she's done a worse job of messing it up than the Algerian boxer. Um, and, she should have taken the Steve Bradbury approach and just said, "Hey, I'm not a very good break dancer. I was in there. Well, I shouldn't say not very good. I was not as good as the other competitors." That's what she should have said. And she did say it. And she should have stuck with that. Just said, "Look, represent Australia in the Olympics. I'm 36 years old. I'm 10 years past older than the next oldest. I'm not at the top of my game. I'm doing this to give myself a chance. Didn't work. Oh well, I gave it my best shot." That's what she should have done. In fact, she did say that, but then she backpedaled and lied. And this is a problem. When I look at it, it's people that lie about things and give yourself 10 different stories. People start hating them. Now, I look at Cameron Bancroft, and he tampered with the ball, of course, back in 2018. And then he lied about it, and his lies got Steve Smith banned. And then he lied some more and got David Warner banned. Then he lied some more and tried to get the bowlers banned, and then lied some more and lied some more and lied some more. And I think she's lied like 7 different versions of the story. And people hate him for that. And yet people also support him because they believe those lies because he's had support in the media unbelievably. And I think Raygun has hoped that she'd get this sort of media corruption that Cameron Bancroft got, where media have just blatantly lied and said, "Oh, he was thrown under the bus." some people have said that Raygun was bullied. We've got um, what's Mia's first name? I can't remember. Um, and we've got the Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister. So Mia's Anna Mears, I think it was. So she was the head of Australian Olympic Committee player athletes, something like that. And so she said, "Oh, stop bullying her." And a lot of other people did too. She got this positive press coverage, and yet she didn't use it. She didn't. So she lied as badly as Cameron Bancroft. Got a lot of positive press coverage, a lot of cover-ups for it, and didn't use it. So she's got a PhD. You have to be pretty smart to get a PhD. Why is she not smart in this? Why is she not hiring a public relations person? She doesn't need a lawyer, she needs a public relations person. She needs someone to fix up her image. I would say to her, fire those lawyers. They're just in it for the money. Asking for $10,000, which they know they'll never get, and that's an absurd amount to ask in that situation. Should be asking for 500 and then accepting 250. And they offered 500. Should have just accepted it and let them do their musical. And you know, it's yeah. I think that she's a problem, and I think that the sooner that she at least hires someone to fix her public image, she's clearly got money, just hire someone and start doing the right thing, not the wrong thing. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye now.